Welcome to Amplify Women in Research. Today I'm pleased to have Dr. Leisha Strachan with me from the University of Manitoba in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Recreation Management. Dr. Strachan is a SSHRC-funded scientist with expertise in sport, coaching, and positive youth development. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Strachan. We'll get right into it. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your most cited work in the area that you're in?
Sure. I did my doctoral work at Queen's University under the guidance of Dr. Jean Cote and Dr. Janice Deacon. And as part of my doctoral thesis, sort of the third study, which was kind of an offshoot, sort of sideline study, after doing the larger studies that I thought would be a little more impactful, but it was really the smaller study. Some interviews that I did with 5 high-performance coaches, 5 high-performance youth coaches, asking them about how they are providing positive spaces for their high-performance athletes in their sport. And it's a 2011 paper called A New View, and kind of understanding a little bit more about elite sport contexts. And, I've gotten just such great feedback about that little paper. And, I often get an email, something from someone, if they're asking for a paper or something. It's usually this particular paper that was published in Qualitative Research in Sport, Exercise, and Health. And I just think I've been always interested in youth sport development, particularly in elite sport contexts, and how to make those more positive spaces. And so I think because my heart came through in that paper, that's really where my heart was lying. I do coach, I coach myself. And so I think, in the interviews and being able to go observe practices and really talk to coaches and really make connections with them, I think that's maybe why that paper has done so well. I was so comfortable writing it, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that's what really increased my love for qualitative research, and why I would firmly put myself in as a qualitative researcher now. So I think that paper, it sort of talked about these 3 key elements that are important, the importance of appropriate training environments, the importance of opportunities for all kinds of development, physical, personal, social, as well as the importance of supportive interactions in those contexts, and how that looks in elite sport, which wasn't something, I guess, that was talked about too much at that time. Yeah,
and actually there's 2 really good lessons in there. One is you never know where those little side projects are going to go, right? Totally. And the other one is to really find what you care about, because it does end up being so much better, right? Like, if
absolutely.
you're passionate about it, it'll be better written and it'll be better cited and more impactful, right?
Absolutely. You have to, I think any researcher is really, we're really fortunate and blessed to be able to, delve deeply into things that we're passionate about and that we really enjoy doing. And so, I think, again, it was, trying to think about, okay, what 3 studies am I going to do? And we had these first 2 studies that were very clear. And this third study, well, let's see. But it's also, I think, the lesson of really being in tune with your own research and seeing where those future directions take you and seeing where the research is pointing you, because the second study kind of just pointed me in this direction. Like, you know what? Go and talk to the coaches, So yeah. It kind of went that way. And it wasn't the paper I thought that most people would ask me about, but usually that's the one.
Yeah. Is there one that you thought people would ask you about, but they didn't?
Yeah. I think, I started out really interested in looking at the difference between kids who sample and kids who specialize, and understanding a little bit more about those and the positive youth development angle in those. So I think I thought I might be asked more about those. I unpacked those in my first 2 studies a little bit more. But also, lately I've been working on a resource called Project Score. And I'll put the link in, I'll send the link to you. It's projectscore.ca. And it's another project that's really close to my heart. And again, an offshoot of this other work, kind of just creating this story around coaching and how to coach in a more positive way and help kids in a deliberate way look at the outcomes. And so with a SSHRC-funded project in 2011, myself and Dr. Cote and Danny McDonald at Prince Edward university, we were able to develop Project Score, which is an online resource for coaches to learn more about how to actually deliver positive youth programming. And I thought that might take off a little bit more. It's again, now this is more of a passion project. Now I'm just determined that I really want to. I thought it'd be a little more easy, but it's okay. We've only had a couple like kind of small papers come out around it. So we're still just looking for some funding to try to do some larger studies around Project Score, and I think that might help. We haven't been as successful lately, but we're going to keep trying for sure. But I think trying to combine what I enjoy doing in terms of coaching and really trying to give coaches more practical, I guess, experiences and more practical information about how to do the positive sport experiences, I think is what I thought is a little more underrated, but you know, I think it'll catch up, I think, eventually, especially after the situation we've been in. I think coaches are really trying to think a lot more about how they're connecting and what they can do differently in their sport experiences. And so I think this is a little bit of a breath for youth sport to think about that a little bit more.
And it's so interesting when you're in a research area that has such direct applications to practice, right? So I mean, it's great because then the conversations that you have with coaches are informing your research, and research is informing the practice. So it's a great way to see it all come together.
Absolutely. And you know, I've been coaching for over 25 years now, which is crazy. And I think, you know, in my own coaching practice, it's you know, I find it difficult, you know, and being the general area of sports psychology, you know, and I'm in the field and I know how important it is and I really value it. And so, you know, I really try, I try to be really deliberate about the things I do in my own practice, but I understand the time crunches and stresses that coaches have with just delivery and all the other things that you have to worry about as a coach. And so, you know, if I'm struggling, I'm thinking like, wow, like, you know, a coach that maybe doesn't value it as much or is kind of on the fence, it's going to be extra hard to maybe try to convince them, right? So we're kind of still in the business of trying to convince coaches of the importance, and that if you actually focus on these things, it'll actually make your sport experience and program better, you know? So
yeah, and so that's an impactful program that you've got up and running. Is that what you would say, sort of over the course of your career to date, has been the most impactful project? Or
I think it's getting there in terms of impact. I don't know if it's impactful yet. One current thing that we're doing right now, and again, this speaks to sort of just being open to collaborations as well, is I've been partnering with a doctoral candidate not in our faculty. She's actually in peace and conflict studies, and her name's Michelle Lemonius, and she's very close to finishing, but she kind of got me involved in a project that's happening in Jamaica. And her area is really understanding more about sexual violence in the Jamaican context. And she wanted to sort of help young women in Jamaica, and thought sport might be a good way to do that, you know, getting involved in starting a soccer program in a lower income community in Jamaica. So we've gone down to Jamaica maybe 4 times now, and Project Score has been a part of that, which I'm super blessed and pumped that it is. So I've been able to train the coaches who are part of that program. And right now we're just really looking at coach outcomes and just coach training, a little bit more about that. And then she's kind of looking more at the other piece with parents, and she's educating parents more about sexual violence and what to look for and that kind of stuff. So while the soccer program's happening, there's sort of this other program happening with parents. And so, so right now I feel like that's been impactful, the most impactful current project that I have going on. And I think it's because when I'm down there, I really can interact with the athletes or the kids. It's just the young women, and really serve as a role model for them. And you know, the questions that they ask me, and the ways I'm able to interact with them, I think just makes my heart really happy. And I think has such a good potential to be really impactful. And the other community members we speak to while we're there, you know, they're interested in expanding it and trying to do it in different community centers. And I think that's really great. And so I think that current project right now can might be a launch pad for some change to happen, particularly in the Caribbean, where maybe not a lot of this research filters down to, and they're not as aware about it. So yeah.
It's another great example of how the work that we do can be applied in totally unique settings, right? Like you probably never thought that you would use sport in a group of women who had been victims of sexual violence, and here you are providing such a positive program for them. So I think
Yeah,
it's good for us to think about the power of what we do in these different contexts, right? Because
absolutely.
we
Yeah,
all know, all of us who are engaged in physical activity and sport and exercise know the benefits, but I think it's important for us to get those benefits to other people. So that's a great example of that.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And I think it's not only, the young players that we're speaking to, but also, the point of the program is to empower women. So there's only women coaches as well. And so I think, speaking to the coaches as well, who have so much experience, but maybe don't have much opportunity in the Caribbean. There's still a lot of gender barriers to break down in terms of sport and everywhere, but particularly in the Caribbean context. And so, so I think, for them as well, for us to have conversations, and I just learned so much talking to them as well. And I hope it's the same, but I've learned a lot from them, and I've had some great conversations with them as well.
So that's a good point to sort of wrap it up on, is what would you say to early or mid-career researchers who are sort of getting started in the field? What words of wisdom would you want to share with them?
As an aside, I always, the joke that I have with a couple of my colleagues is that, I still feel like I'm a early career researcher.
Don't we all?
I oh my gosh, they're like, you're senior faculty, and I'm what? Not yet, not yet. So but in the time that I've had so far, I think some things that I would maybe point out is the importance of collaboration, allowing yourself to be open to different fields and different areas, and sport is just so great that it really goes across so many different areas. And so to keep ourselves insular into one faculty or staying in just among our sport people, I think we do a little bit of an injustice. I think we do have to think about how sport is weaved in a lot of different areas. And I know sociologists are great at that, but I feel like in sports psychology, maybe we're not so great at that right now. So I would say to do that. I would also say to really work for balance. We talk about that. What does that mean and look like? I know it looks different to everybody. But really trying to protect your time as much as you can. The time, if you love doing something, if you have an artistic passion and you love art or you love dance, and you're finding that you're sacrificing that a little bit. I mean, of course you may have to at certain times, but I think if you can stay connected to that artistic passion, connected to that spirit that you have, that is just so key. I think that saved me a lot. I've always been involved in dance, and I still dance, and I run a group here in Winnipeg called the Nancy School for the Performing Arts that now we're in our 11th season, which is unbelievable. And, it's about teaching kids about Caribbean African culture through the arts. And that push to, have to be there on Saturdays, sometimes when I'm in the middle of trying to get a grant done or trying to get something, having to leave my house, go step away and do this program and come back, I think, and it always just fills me up so much when I'm just working with the kids and can let go of things. So that importance of keeping that artistic passion is so important. And the final thing is just, as I said, protecting your time, having limits for students, particularly if you're teaching courses. I've right from the beginning, I didn't know it would last. I would be able to hold on to it as long as I have. But right from the beginning, I've always said, like, end of the workday is end of the workday for students, So if it's 4:30, for not my grad students necessarily, but definitely undergraduates, these are the work hours. I'm not going to be checking my email on the weekends, unless it has to do with research and things I have to do. But trying to protect my time that way has been really great, and I've been able to do it still. And I think that's great. As I get a little further in my career, and if administration comes in or something, it might be different. But
Yeah.
right now, I've been able to protect that time, and I think it's just establishing boundaries. And once you do
Yeah.
that, students know they'll comply to that.
Yeah, I think it's so important to practice what we preach, right? Like we want
Absolutely.
physical activity is important, all those things. And I think, kind of like you said, there are going to be times in the year when grants are due and things are busy, but you can't sustain that long time. So make
Absolutely.
sure that if you're getting to a point where that's all the time to reevaluate, right? Like,
Yes, yeah, yeah. And the last thing, if I have time to,
yeah,
as you're talking about that as well, particularly for women of color, in our fields, there's not as many women of color. I don't find in sports fields, which is another whole conversation. I think that definitely needs to be unpacked a bit. But I think too, for women of color, not being afraid to speak up, not being afraid to hold some positions, if you can. Representation does matter. We have students of all different backgrounds, and I think it's really important for them to see that in a post-secondary context as well. And I know universities are aware of that and are definitely working more towards that. I know here at the University of Manitoba, I've definitely had Black students come up to me in courses, particularly earlier on when I was teaching some of the larger courses, and they would say, "Wow, it's like I'm in my fourth year and I've never had a Black professor," and it's so great to to speak to a Black professor, and even if I'm not even in their area, they'll
yeah,
come to office hours just to chat and get some advice about maybe where to go and stuff like that. So I think that's important, just to encourage people of color to really and women of color to particularly try to stand up and have a voice in their faculties if they can.
definitely. And I think, the more people that are out there from these underrepresented groups, the more of a community there will be. Because I think it can be lonely sometimes. Like you don't want to stand out all the time because then you develop the reputation of, oh, Shilpa again, right? Like,
Right.
you don't want to be that person either. But hopefully you get to a point where you're comfortable speaking up, and you have people you can call on and talk to for support. And
Totally.
we'll get there soon. But we definitely need to keep it on our minds.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. It's awesome chatting. We haven't chatted in years, so this is
I know. I miss seeing you. I guess
a
have to.
nice catch up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Thanks for
Thank you
getting.
so much.
Yeah. Take care.